Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Tripsas. I'm a platform solutions architect at Zype. And typically when I do these presentations, it is overly about the consumers. It's about the technology. But today I want to take a little bit more of a practical approach. So I want to talk about, well, let me actually first introduce myself like I am doing. For those who don't know me, I have worked in video engineering for about three and a half years. Before that, I worked with integrating the state of New York's healthcare exchange. Before that, I helped build Grand Theft Auto 5. And before that, I worked for the Blackstone Group building algo trading platforms. So video, though, is relatively new, but data is data. So I thought we'd get along pretty well. And now I work for Zype, which is an online content and distribution platform. It's an OVP. We've been around since about 2014. I joined in 15. And I don't know why it keeps doing that. But we publish, deliver OTT content, kind of Netflix in a box. It's all white labeled, all white branded. And why does it keep doing that? OK, hold on. Yes, that is Wyndham in upstate New York, so let's try to get away from that. Hold on. What is going on here? And now I've lost the presentation entirely. No. What is going on here? All right. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. How do we move that back over here? I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'm trying to, I forget how to do that actually. I'm trying to mirror it is what I want to do. I should have done this before, but I didn't realize. Not air display. Arrangement. There we go. Sweet. Sorry about that, guys. And it looks like I've closed out my presentation during that whole thing. Nope. Damn it. Come on. There we go. All right. That was a struggle. Sorry, guys. So I'm going to take all the marketing slides and just like that, right? Don't we like that? All right. So that's OK with me because I'm an architect anyway. I only want to talk about the things that matter. Marketing is not among them. So let's talk about challenges that face live broadcasters. And this is more to the point, right? So as more and more live streams originate over the public internet, you're starting to see more small and medium-sized broadcasters that are relying on the open internet to originate or syndicate their live streams. What is wrong with the public internet? It is the Wild West. Traditional broadcasters are used to dealing with satellite, used to dealing with MPEG over cable, used to dealing with MPLS or dual band MPLS that stretch the world. They have control. They have procedure. The internet is not like that. And from a cost-cutting perspective, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than laying down fiber. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to use the public internet. But how do we control it? How do we maintain QoS? How do we maintain quality? And that leads to the next question. It's a mesh of protocols, connectivity technologies, device manufacturers, mismatch of software, browsers, players, DRM. It's a mess, on top of the fact that it's a public internet. And then, of course, how do we maintain delivery? Not just consistency in the source, but downstream ABR, codecs, multi-CDN strategies, enable coding practices and principles. Those are all tools you could leverage. So I'm going to start with some basics. Like I said, I'm going to do this a little bit more technical, but I'll high level a lot of it. Let's consider the source and the destinations. Source streams, the quality are often a product of environmental conditions and venue selection. Now, this is a lot more geared towards smaller, medium businesses. But as internet becomes more ubiquitous throughout the entire country, and I'm not just saying internet in general, I mean with bandwidth sufficient to support both downstream and upstream markets, we need to take all these things into consideration. Understanding your bandwidth availability is critical. Bitrate selection on available bandwidth, obviously being ready to adjust moments before you go live. Now, I'm talking about live in general. When we're talking about encoding for VOD, there are a number of different entropies, a number of different codecs, a number of different processes we could talk about. Whether we're taking visual references of actual frames and deleting all that data, whether we're having more complex or more efficient codecs being leveraged in the marketplace, whether or not most of the consumer base can actually play them back yet or not. But we're just talking about live. When it comes to one thing, it was just this Saturday, when it comes to weather and in-studio environment crowds, I think most people don't, I think at least broadcast engineers, and that's typically my audience bases, they don't understand people. And when people show up to venues, there are over 500 people who are just going to suddenly come to your venue and start using the internet. You can't rely on a test to go well if you don't expect anybody else coming to that same venue to also be using Facebook Live, to be using YouTube Live, to be using Instagram. You have to account for these factors. And as such, you need to ask yourself several questions. Do I have enough bandwidth, and do I have an isolated circuit? Are you sending a single source to your provider, whoever that provider may be? It could be a CDN provider, it could be an OVP. Are you sending additional streams to social media, multicast targets, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch? Add those all up, I'm already at 50 megs a second. Do I think I'm going to get 50 megs a second out of a cell tower when 500 other people show up at a baseball game in the middle of Texas? No, you're not. You're never going to, unless there's a lot of cell towers. Realistically, that's an extreme. So how do we combat these things? Backup stream sources. Now, my favorite countermeasure to most of this, and you may think it's crazy, this is small potatoes, but I think a lot of us don't like to spend the amount of money that we spend on fiber optic uplinks that we're tracking out to the field, or satellite trucks that cost a small fortune, then we have to go borrow time from MSNBC or CNN. The truth is we could do this pretty efficiently with IP, but now how do we do it? Now, cellular bonded backups would be something I've been using for about 2 years, and they've saved me from everything from Neil deGrasse Tyson doing a live show out of the Beacon Theater here in Manhattan. We had a fiber outage, and was with Bill Nye as well, and I threw a Teradek under the stage, and it had bonded cellular with Verizon and AT&T. It saved the day. It saved the day for their entire streaming service. It saved the day for a number of people watching online. Another position is, like I said before, real-time sports. Now, I know when Fox was doing a broadcast with MLB, they had a truck outage. Somebody tripped over a cord that was connected to the generator. The whole thing went down. I think at minimum, we need to also talk about what we call lowest common denominator of failure. And that is, at minimum, you don't ever want to go dark. You want to keep a slate up. So in the live streaming world, you always want to work with a provider that has at least an online video playing, at least a slate available. You don't ever want to see buffering. You don't ever want to go see dark. I would much rather my consumer stay and watch technical difficulties banner than completely leave the environment and go to Facebook and do something else. That retention is extremely important. Continental bandwidth in the United States, this is 25 megs down, 3 megs up. You can see the 3 central corridors, east, west, central, and they're starting to increase. But as we start to get into the prospects of 4K and the compression that is still on its way, it's here, AV1, VP10, it's getting there, but we need hardware to decode it. Software can decode it, it's slow, it's a bear. So as we move up, realistically, we're going to need more bandwidth, or we're going to need that hardware to catch up. And here's the market for 110. It's a big difference in fixed bandwidth in the United States. This does not include mobile. There is a huge difference between what is currently supported in the 12 megabits a second down versus 100. We have a long way to go. So bringing bandwidth into mind, ensuring how you make the most of your bandwidth. So first mile is where every live stream is won or lost, right? You want to first select a codec that would, I believe, now others may want to weigh in on this, but my experience has proven that I always want to pick a codec that provides the most compatible or ease of use for conversion downstream. Because that conversion is inevitably going to happen, whether I'm converting it back to MPEG-TS, whether I'm staying with H.264, whether I'm passing it over the YouTube for VP9, whether I'm re-encapsulating it as HLS or dash, I need to pick a lower common denominator, conversions up or down. Could lose bandwidth, could take more processing time, could lose quality, could gain quality. Try to keep it simple. Just because an on-site encoder, whether it's a $50,000 product from Newtek or it's a $500 product from somebody else, you want to try to keep them all the same. And yes, they may in fact have H.265. They may in fact have VP9 on board. But if you dial everything up and say, well, I'm going to turn on VP9 and call it a day, and I mean, it doesn't matter if this is an NFL game or a high school sporting event, if the hardware can't physically handle it, then what's the point? Right? So we want to try to keep things simple. And of course, attempt to secure an isolated circuit. First, like I said, test your codecs. Don't just enable them haphazardly. And always have a bonded cellular solution. LiveView makes a great product, too. I mentioned the TerraDuck before. I like the LiveView product. I'm not here to, I don't have partnerships with any of these guys. I've used them. I like them. Protocols. First mile, RTMP and RTMPS. UDP pull, not necessarily recommended for lower end tier clients. If you have a hosted facility, great, love it. I will say this, UDP is UDP, not much you can do about it. But Zixi in OctoShape, not so much OctoShape anymore, but now Zixi really, I've had most of my 24/7 cable broadcasters syndicating content from Paris to London to Los Angeles on Zixi, and latency is quite good. And we've been using it for most of our 24/7 clients going forward. Bandwidth and encoding, I'm going to leave this kind of open slate. Everyone has their own preference. I throw it out there 1085 to 6 to 8. Again, 720, 1.8, 3 to 4 megabits per second. And then the question that comes up a lot to me is CBR. When do we use it? When do we not? Well, it depends. And if those want a quick refresher of what all this is, and I'll go through this a little bit. CBR is a constant bit rate, which means each frame uses the same amount of bits, regardless of if they need them or not. Can this be good or bad? Both. VBR means that you could vary the amount of bits used to represent each frame, and the overall average amount of bits per frame is achieved. It does this by stealing bits from other frames with less information to encode that don't need them, and giving them to frames that have more information to encode who does need them. So I think it's about use case. It's also about available bandwidth. In general, VBR is what most of first mile upstream codecs are going to start pushing out. And that's what most of that's going to be wrapped into RTMP, or whether it's UDP, it doesn't matter. It's going to be usually VBR. Where I do see CBR use cases, if they have the available bandwidth to really push a stream hard, then it makes downstream distribution all the easier. And I'll tell you why. Because in the modern world, in this IP world that we've created, stop doing that. Come on, be nice. In this IP world that we've created, we are constantly resyndicating all this content to other providers. And as we're resyndicating this content, we have a decent amount of bandwidth in the cloud. I need a better HDMI cable, or it's my laptop. I don't know. This is like a NES controller. There's no reason this can't be fun, you know. Wunderbar. All right. There is a, you know, I forgot when I lost my place. Okay, CBR. The use case that I find is when I'm syndicating to other providers. The Akamais, the Fastleys, the Limelights, the Edgecasts, all of them. And all of them have a different ingestion methodology when it, come on. All of them have a different ingestion methodology when it comes to, I'll go to a different slide. There we go. Ben Stiller, help me out here, buddy. When it comes to ingestion. So you have raw RTMP that comes in, and then you have direct conversion to either HLS or dash. And then you have direct ingestion of HLS and dash. Where I see the application is when you are doing direct RTMP ingestion between providers. And the reason is that it's the multi-hop syndrome. I have to go to an ingress. I have to go to a midgress. I now have to go to an egress. That egress is probably going to write to some sort of form of storage. And I'm going to present that storage up to another cloud or additional midgress cache. All of those hops add up. And all those hops add up to latency. And all those hops add up to additional possibility of lost frames. So I CBR those transfers. Now, for direct HLS and dash ingestion, where I am in fact serving as origin, I'm probably going to just do that myself. No, I don't. No, it's the older one. We're almost there. I'll run through the end. I'm sorry about that, guys. All right. Practical applications of CBR. If you encode a video at 6 megabits per second CBR, another with VBR, the VBR will have better quality. And that's typically because the varying bit rate will give more frames, more bits that actually need it, as opposed to CBR. Now, I just said the opposite when syndicating between parties or providers. The reason is I have infinite-ish bandwidth. I'm in the cloud already. I'm on the backhauls. I have the availability. And I find when other providers are also converting, they're not taking my particular encoding metrics and or presets or and or renditions, my 1080s, my 480s, basically my pixel density, my bits per pixel ratios that I'm doing my own calculations on. They're not taking those into account. They're either flatlining, whatever their business model is, and that's fine. They lose quality. So if we want to try to beat the internet, we got to beat them at their own game. I got to up it a bit. That's when I'm using CBR. Everything else I'm using VBR for, like I said, mostly for the ingest. And that's the practical application between the two. So like I said, don't always use it, but those are the two use cases in which I do. Here's a beautiful graph that I drew that shows bit rate, CBR versus VBR for those who are not sure what I'm talking about. But these slides can be made available. CBR, like I said, in live, removes the peaks that were otherwise low error ended. Real-time encoders have issues handling the source. That is also true when we're talking about inter-provider. So if there is, in fact, a frame drop between, say, me and Akamai, and I'm doing a direct RTMP ingest, as I'm passing those frames over, if I, in fact, now suddenly miss a bunch of frames and I don't have a full bit rate, the next, in fact, frame that comes into Akamai is going to get crushed to hell. And I'll have buffering eventually on the downstream side. Now, it's nobody's fault. That's just what happened. If I send them CBR, that all goes away. Does add a little bit of latency, but it's a good one to learn if you've never been through that before. Provider to provider. This is a little bit more on the provider side, not on the first mile. And this is about midgress. Again, selecting codecs. When I'm selecting codecs, say the Zype has a playout service that we just won Product of the Year for at NAB. So we built it to handle MPEG TS, which is, again, lowest common denominator. We're encoding everything in MPEG. And then I am then formatting it, whether I'm chunking it, whether I'm adding SCSI markers, whether I'm sending it and syndicating it to Zixi and the Sling, pushing it up to VP9 over to YouTube, TV. I always start with the lowest one first, because I could then turn it into practically anything. Providers. And we actually just talked about this. Unfortunately, I got a little off place because of the blinkage. Look for ingestion accelerators. If your provider has them, now I know some do. They have ingestion points where they turn their edge locations into first mile edge receptors. Now I love that. You want to try to reduce your first mile as much as possible. This is enormously huge on the internet. The less hops, the better. The less congestion, the better. The less collisions, the better. So if you have a CDN provider, if you have a multi-tier or level 3 or whatever you guys are using out there, and if they have accelerators and ingestion sources, use them. I know Akamai does. I know others have them as well. The faster you can get your stream onto a backhaul fiber optic network, the more stable your streams are going to be. Don't ride the public ISPs as much. That's kind of the thing there. So how does all this come together? So at Zype, I came up with, we all came up with this way of targeting downstream consumers by groups. Mobile phones don't need to run 4K. Only the East and West Coast really use 4K. We're leaving millions of people on the table. Everybody should try to encode their data and deliver their video custom tailored to the consumer, not for the quality, not to say that I've done the best or highest bandwidth 4K thing. This is my philosophy. I don't care about the sticker that says I pushed the highest 4K thing in the world. If only 2 people watched it, who cares? That's my view. So we created a system that allows us to specifically identify individual consumers, where they are, based on their user agents, based on geo-targeting of the ISP geo-target databases, the browsers that they use, everything that the dynamic ad insertions based on their geography, based on their IPs, based on their localizations, on how to handle server-side ad ingestion with local client ad macros, which is enormously huge because now I get the benefit of server-side plus client-side macros so I can localize advertisements. Now I can get somebody watching a Panera Bread ad from down the street on a national feed. So things like that. And all of that's done by targeting them individually. Not only that, end consumers now have unique ABR groups. Mobile has a different bitrate encoding settings, even though they're 288, 480, 720. They still stay in that range. But they have a tuned down encoded bit rates as opposed to the OTT and the smart TV markets. And like I said, 4K is a very select geo-targeted group. That's how we kind of run through them. Individual manifests are delivered dynamically. And each of them generate on an on-per request, on session, and per consumer basis by device. In the DRM world, as we were trying to stop everyone from stealing our content, we all know that we run it across browsers made by Mozilla, Apple, Google, do not support each other's codecs, encryption technology. It's a real pain. Hopefully we're going to solve all of this soon with a universal format. Apple finally came on board with some of this. But as of it is right now, we still have to support legacy devices. So even if we have the sunrise tomorrow, we have 5 years of devices still to support. So it's important to be able to identify them, and you have to do it anyway. So with that in mind, individual manifest helps to solve the server-side ads, groups with ABR, as well as identification for DRM applications, as well as JIT, just-in-time processing, so you don't have to have all this video sitting on primary storage. Why do we have 5 copies of video sitting on storage? I could go, back in the day, you can go to a data center, buy a storage rack, EMC, 20 grand a shelf, and you could put all your storage there, but that's a fixed cost, and so you have some licensing. But now on AWS or GCP or Azure, I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars every month, every single month for blocks of storage. Why? Why? Let's do more just-in-time processing if the cloud will provide. And the cloud was designed for scalability or on-demand processing. Let's leverage it. And I will be. So that's it, guys. I'm sorry for the blank, by the way, about the slide.
Double round of applause for Steve for surviving the technology out.